Preface. Horror has always been a fascination of mine, and it's a joy to share that with my son. This collection of stories is a testament to our mutual love of the genre. So turn off the lights, grab a blanket, and prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. Chapter 3. The Revelation. Ethan sat in the dim glow of his apartment, hands trembling as they hovered over his keyboard. The image of the coffin still burned in his mind, taunting him from the screen. He couldn't stop looking at it, couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn into something far darker than he could comprehend. A knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. Ethan froze, his heart racing. He wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, he got up, peering through the peephole. Standing outside was a woman in a dark coat, a serious expression on her face. She held a small notebook in one hand, and Ethan recognized her immediately. It was Detective Claire Reynolds. "Ethan Carter? I'm Detective Reynolds. We need to talk," she said through the door, her voice calm but firm. Ethan hesitated for a moment before unlocking the door and letting her in. Claire stepped inside, her sharp eyes scanning the messy apartment, taking in the scattered papers, disheveled desk, and darkened computer screen. "Looks like you've been busy," she remarked, her tone neutral, but her gaze lingering on the chaos. Ethan shut the door behind her. His voice was hoarse. "What's this about?" Claire turned to face him, pulling out her notebook. "I'm here about some recent disappearances. You knew one of the victims, Marcus Graves." Ethan's stomach lurched. He felt his knees weaken as the weight of her words hit him. "Marcus, he's missing?" he whispered, the blood draining from his face. Claire nodded. "He hasn't been seen in 2 days. He was last tracked near this area. Care to explain that?" Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. He remembered Marcus being here just a few nights ago, urging him to shut everything down. He remembered the fear in Marcus's voice when they last spoke. "He was here," Ethan said shakily. "A few days ago. He was helping me with something, but I don't know what happened to him." Claire's eyes narrowed, her voice measured. "Helping you with what?" Ethan faltered. How could he explain what was going on without sounding completely insane? He knew he had no choice but to tell her the truth, even if it made him sound paranoid. "We were working on an app," Ethan said slowly. "It was supposed to pull public images, but something went wrong. It's been collecting photos of me, real-time photos. Someone's watching me. And now Marcus, he warned me. He knew something was wrong." Claire's frown deepened, but she kept her voice steady. "Real-time photos? Are you suggesting someone's been spying on you?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice growing more desperate. "They've been watching me. I found pictures of me sleeping, pictures of me sitting here just like now. Look." Ethan rushed to his computer, pulling up the folder of images, his hands shaking as he clicked through the files. He pointed at the screen, showing Claire the disturbing images. Photos of him at the cafe, photos of him in his apartment, the coffin. Claire leaned in, her expression unreadable. She was silent for a moment before finally speaking. "Have you considered the possibility that someone hacked your devices? Maybe you're under surveillance, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's anything supernatural." Ethan shook his head vehemently. "Number, it's not just a hack. It's something more. Marcus knew it too. He said I tapped into something bigger than either of us, something I shouldn't have found. He warned me to shut it all down." "And did you?" Claire asked, her eyes locked on him. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Number, I couldn't stop." Before Claire could respond, the computer screen flickered. The images disappeared, replaced by a black screen with a single message. You shouldn't have let her in. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the screen, his heart racing. He turned to Claire, who stood unmoving, her expression now cold, distant. "What is this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who's doing this?" Claire didn't answer immediately. She stepped back, her face shadowed in the dim light. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, almost too calm. "You were warned, Ethan," she said quietly. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He took a step back, his mind spinning. The room seemed to grow darker, the walls closing in around him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. Claire didn't look at him as she moved toward the door. "You're in over your head. Walk away while you still can." And with that, she left, the door clicking shut behind her. Ethan stood frozen in place, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Claire's words echoed in his head. Had she been part of this all along? Was she sent to keep him quiet? Ethan's breath hitched in his throat. His hands trembled as he dropped the phone onto the desk. Panic surged through him. He bolted out of his chair, rushing to the window. The street below was empty, quiet, but he knew better. He knew they were out there, watching him, waiting for the next move. He could feel it. His heart pounded in his chest as he paced the room, his mind whirling. He couldn't stay here. Not anymore. Later that night, Ethan was on the move. He had left his apartment, walking briskly through the empty streets. The fog clung to the sidewalks, thick and heavy. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, but he didn't check it. He didn't need to. He knew what waited for him on the screen. More images, more warnings. His phone rang suddenly, the sharp sound breaking through the silence. It was Lena. "Ethan? Where are you? What's going on? You haven't been home in days." Lena's worried voice filled the air, trembling with concern. Ethan looked around, his paranoia creeping into every thought. "I can't talk right now, Lena. It's not safe. His voice cracked under the pressure, his mind barely able to focus. The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone in disbelief as the screen flickered. One final message appeared before the phone went dark. "It's over, Ethan." Weeks later. Lena Carter sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through family photos on the MacBook she and Ethan had once shared. Her eyes were swollen and red from crying, her fingers tracing the edges of a photo showing her and Ethan smiling on vacation. Ethan had been missing for weeks, and the investigation had gone cold. The hope she'd clung to was fading. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. It was Detective Claire Reynolds. Lena picked up the phone, her voice tired and hollow. "Hello? Mrs. Carter, I just wanted to follow up. We still haven't found any leads on Ethan's whereabouts. I'll keep you updated if anything changes," Claire said, her tone professional, almost detached. "Thanks," Lena replied absently, barely hearing the words. She hung up the phone and turned her attention back to the MacBook. She scrolled through the photos aimlessly, her mind too numb to process much of anything. But then, something caught her eye. An image she didn't recognize appeared on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. She clicked on it, her breath catching in her throat. It was Ethan, but the background was dark, unfamiliar. He was blindfolded, his hands and legs bound. He lay next to a coffin, surrounded by masked figures. The image was grainy, but the terror it invoked was sharp and immediate. "What the hell?" Lena gasped, her hands trembling as she flipped through more photos from the same night. Each one was worse than the last, showing angles and scenes that made her stomach turn. The final image stopped her cold. It showed Ethan lying still on the ground, the masked men standing over him in eerie silence. Ethan, Lena whispered, her voice cracking. The screen flickered, and a new message appeared, its words cold and final. You shouldn't have seen this. The MacBook screen went black, leaving Lena staring at the reflection of her terrified face.